Hey everyone, the new Security Plus exam is right around the corner. It's dropping in November of 2020, and I wanted to just share a few thoughts on the differences and similarities between 601 and 501, what you might expect on the 601 exam, some additions that I thought were interesting, and just kind of generally speaking, just kind of blabber on for a few minutes about the new exam. So with that said, let's kind of move over and look at CompTIA's website. The current version of the Security Plus exam that you can take right now is the 501, but the 601 is what is dropping in November. And one thing I want to point out right out of the gate is that you don't have to, if you've been studying for the 501, you don't have to jump ship and start studying for the 601 and completely shift gears, because there is going to be a period of overlap where both exams are available to you. And I believe the 501 is, yeah, it's available until July of 2021. So you don't feel obligated to switch gears and kind of study for this completely new exam if you've already put in a lot of effort and time and tears into studying for the 501. So another thing I want to point out is the exams themselves are very similar in how they will be delivered. So you get the same number of questions, up to 90, the same types of questions, the same time. So you're given 90 minutes. And also the passing score as well as the weird scoring scale are the same. So the passing score is 750 on this strange scale of 100 to 900. So lots of similarities there. And actually, as far as the content itself is concerned, there's also a lot of similarities. It's absolutely evolutionary. It's like an evolutionary change over 501 versus some revolutionary, completely new exam with nothing in common with the previous iteration. So going over to the objectives here, if you compare this to the 601, looking at the high level domains on the exam, some things are different. There's one less domain. A few of the domains got combined into one. Certain things have been shuffled around between domains, and there's been kind of a little bit more emphasis placed on some topics, and a few other topics have been de-emphasized, but there's still a lot in common between the exams. So I'm not going to subject you to me going through each individual subdomain, because that would take a while. But at a high level, like as a rule of the thumb, there's usually going to be a few additions and subtractions, even in these subdomains that are the same as 501. So for instance, the social engineering subdomain in the 501 exam doesn't have things like prepending or invoice scams or credential harvesting. So there's a few additions and subtractions in each of these. But I wanted to point out really some more major changes, some kind of very noticeable additions in the new exam. So scrolling through down to section 1.5, so explain different threat actors, vectors, and intelligence sources. There's actually a huge amount of additional coverage of sources of information, threat intelligence, security intelligence, and so forth, as well as probably, this is a good thing, coverage of how that information is exchanged. So sticks and taxi, for instance, are kind of in that order. Sticks is a way of formatting and representing data about threat intelligence. Taxi is a protocol that can be used to actually exchange threat intelligence. And there's like lots of other things here, obviously, as well. So there's a lot more coverage of getting information that we can then use for protecting our companies or protecting our environments. So that's one major addition. Continuing down, threat hunting is also covered, which kind of ties in a little bit with what we just talked about. So there's a discussion of threat hunting, intelligence fusion, and threat feeds, and so forth. And the next major change that sticks out to me is the coverage of systems that aren't your typical, laptop, desktop, server, kind of atypical systems or special use case systems. There is an expanded coverage of things like embedded systems, like Arduinos, FPGAs, Raspberry Pis. Industrial control systems are covered in more depth, and IoT devices especially are covered a little bit more. So IoT devices are increasingly a concern, so it's a good thing they were added, because more and more people have more and more IoT devices, and those are not necessarily getting any sort of updates. So that is a major concern for a variety of reasons. It's a good addition. Scrolling down here, there are some changes to the cryptography concepts that you need to know for the 601. So there's a few additional concepts, things like perfect forward secrecy and ephemeral keys that weren't in the 501 but probably should have been. And then there are also some kind of new up and coming crypto concepts that are kind of maybe still slightly academic, but maybe 5 years down the line they might not be. So things like quantum cryptography, as well as post-quantum cryptography, quantum attacks, homomorphic encryption, varying degrees of kind of practical application for these technologies currently, but they are on the horizon. So there's discussion of that, which I think is cool, as well as a discussion of blockchain, which is more than just a buzzword and also probably a good inclusion with the new SY0-601 exam. Now just scrolling all the way down, we've got two more things that I want to point out. There is more emphasis placed on actually using different tools for X, Y, or Z, security related tasks. So that could be network enumeration, testing connectivity, enumerating devices, looking for vulnerabilities. So there's a ton of tools, both at the command line as well as kind of graphical user interface based tools that weren't in 501 that are covered in 601. And you can see we've got Wireshark here, DD, so some actual forensics tools for dumping memory or copying data, exploitation frameworks. Just in general, a lot more actual applied tools are covered and mentioned as topics for 601. And here's a little bit more, some attack frameworks. So like the MITRE attack framework, the cyber kill chain, which is, I think that was Lockheed Martin that came up with that term. So it sounds pretty intense. So I guess it caught on because of that. Let's see, we've got some other tools that I highlighted. But just scrolling down here, past the most boring part, which is the regulatory stuff, right at the bottom is what I think is almost an entirely new section, all about privacy and security. So managing privacy, the importance of managing privacy, the repercussions of not managing privacy effectively, like data leaks, and some of the ways that you can enhance privacy without kind of rendering your data maybe useless. So pseudo-anonymization, if I can say that, tokenization. So that's an interesting and I think another good addition to the 601, because privacy is increasingly a concern for a lot of people. And it's also something that time and again has come back to bite certain companies when their databases get leaked or they leave an S3 bucket available to the internet at large. It's never a good look. So it's a good thing that that's being covered, especially with things like GDPR, coming online. That adds a little bit more teeth, and it kind of increases the stakes for companies as they work with customer data. So that is a pretty major addition, kind of a whole new section. And those are the ones I really wanted to point out. But like I said, there are going to be, within each of these individual subdomains or topics, there are absolutely new topics added and also certain subtractions. So I can point some out just quickly going through this. For risk management processes, something new. Risk appetite, that's not covered in the 501. A heat map. Let's see what else. How about control risk, inherent risk? I don't even know if residual risk, that might be in the 501, but I'm not sure. Right, so there's additions and subtractions in each of these. So don't think that that's the extent of the changes, but those were the ones that really stuck out for me. So long story short, if you were able to stay awake through this whole video, it is an update to the 501. It's got new topics, more recent topics, but there is still a lot of overlap. And even if you were studying for the 501 and you want to, for your own personal reasons, take the 601 instead, you absolutely aren't starting from scratch. You still got a good foundation with the 501. It's just the 601 has maybe a few new kind of hip topics in the security realm. So hopefully that was of some use. I definitely recommend, regardless of whether you're taking the 501 exam, the 601 exam, the A plus exam, the Network Plus exam, always go ahead and download the CompTIA exam objectives for that particular test because they tell you exactly what is going to be on it. So it's very handy regardless of what specific test you might be taking. Thanks for joining me. I hope again that maybe gave you an idea about the differences in between the exams, what you might expect on the new one, and hopefully if you have already been studying for the 501, that kind of puts your mind at ease that you still have plenty of time to take that if you'd like to. With that said, I will call it a video. Thanks for joining me.